356 BC Pella, the capital of the kingdom of Macedon in northern Greece, a city that the Greek city-states to the south regard with a mixture of respect and condescension. The Macedonians are Greek in language and culture, but they are also something else. Harder, more militaristic, less refined, in the Athenian sense, a kingdom of warriors on the northern frontier of the Greek world. In July of this year, a child is born to Philip II, king of Macedon, and his wife Olympias, a princess from the kingdom of Epirus. The child is named Alexander. His father Philip is one of the most remarkable rulers of his age. He inherited a weak and threatened kingdom and has transformed it through military innovation, political skill, and relentless campaigning into the dominant power in Greece. He has reformed the Macedonian army, creating the phalanx formation with its long pikes, the sarissas, that will prove almost unstoppable in the hands of a competent commander. He is building something. Whether he knows yet what Alexander will do with it is another matter. His mother Olympias is a formidable and intense woman. She worships Dionysus and is said to keep sacred snakes in her quarters. She fills the young Alexander's mind with stories of divine ancestry. The Macedonian royal family claims descent from Heracles on the father's side and Achilles on the mother's. Olympias takes these claims seriously. She wants her son to understand that he is not ordinary. He absorbs this completely. Alexander grows up in the Macedonian court, surrounded by the sons of noble families who serve as his companions, and later as his generals. Hephaestion, who will become his closest friend for life. Ptolemy, who will rule Egypt after Alexander's death. Cassander, Nearchus. The boys train together, hunt together, compete together. The friendships and the rivalries formed in these years shape the history of the world that follows. From his earliest years, Alexander displays qualities that mark him out: physical courage that sometimes tips into recklessness and intense competitive drive. At the age of 10, he tames a horse that no one else has been able to ride, a black stallion he names Bucephalus. He notices that the horse is frightened by its own shadow and simply turns it to face the sun. Philip watches and is reported to say that his son will need to find a kingdom worthy of him, because Macedon is not enough. Rest now, Pella is quiet tonight. A boy is sleeping in the palace who does not yet know what the world holds for him, but he is already certain, in the way that only the very young and the very remarkable can be certain, that it holds something extraordinary. Good night. (333 BC). Alexander is 13 years old. Philip has decided his son needs the best education available in the Greek world. He writes to the most celebrated thinker of the age, Aristotle of Stagira, the student of Plato, the man who has written on biology, physics, ethics, politics, rhetoric, poetry, and almost every other field of human inquiry that exists in the 4th century BC. Philip offers him a substantial fee and the restoration of his home city of Stagira, which Philip had previously destroyed. Aristotle accepts. The lessons take place at a sanctuary called the Nymphaeon near the city of Mysa in Macedon. Alexander and his companions study there for approximately 3 years. It is one of the most consequential teachers and student relationships in history. What exactly passes between them shapes how Alexander sees the world for the rest of his life. Aristotle teaches him philosophy, medicine, rhetoric, and science. He instills in Alexander a love of Homer that the young man carries to his death. Alexander sleeps with a copy of the Iliad under his pillow alongside a dagger he identifies deeply with Achilles, the hero of the Iliad, the man who chooses a short, glorious life over a long, obscure one. This identification is not casual. It is a template for how Alexander understands his own existence. Aristotle also teaches him about the peoples and cultures of the world beyond Macedon, about Persia and Egypt and India, about the geography of Asia, about the diversity of human societies and how they govern themselves. Alexander's later curiosity about the peoples he conquers, his interest in their customs and religions, his willingness to incorporate their practices into his own court. All of this has roots in what Aristotle shows him about the breadth of the human world. The relationship is not without tension. Aristotle believes that non-Greeks are naturally inferior and should be ruled by Greeks. Alexander will later act in ways that directly contradict this, whether this is because he disagrees with Aristotle or because the realities of governing a vast multi-ethnic empire override the philosophy, is something historians continue to debate. Aristotle gives Alexander a copy of the Iliad with his own annotations. Alexander carries it through every campaign. He treasures it more than any other possession. After the capture of the Persian king's treasury at Damascus, he finds a golden casket and asks what it should hold. He is told it can hold whatever is most precious. He places the annotated Iliad inside. The education ends when Alexander is around 16. Philip calls him back to Pella. He is needed, the kingdom requires him. His education is over, but what it has placed in him will travel to the edges of the known world. Rest now. The gardens of Mias are quiet. Tonight, the greatest teacher of the ancient world has done what he can. What happens next is up to the student. Good night. Good night.
(336 BC Age), the ancient ceremonial capital of Macedon. A royal wedding is being celebrated. Philip's daughter is marrying the king of Epirus. The festivities are elaborate. In public, Philip enters the theater in a procession, walking between his son Alexander and his new son-in-law. Deliberately, without bodyguards, he wants to be seen as a king, secure enough to walk unprotected among his people. A young Macedonian nobleman named Pausanias steps out of the crowd and stabs Philip. The king dies almost immediately. Pausanias tries to reach a horse and escape, but is caught and killed before he can be questioned. The reasons behind the assassination are debated by ancient sources and modern historians. Personal grievance against Philip is the most documented motive. Whether others were involved, including possibly Olympias or even Alexander, is something ancient sources raise but do not resolve. The evidence is insufficient to reach a firm conclusion. Alexander is 20 years old. He moves immediately and decisively. He has Philip's other potential rivals within Macedon eliminated before they can organize opposition. The Macedonian army, which had served Philip for decades, declares its loyalty to the new king. Alexander addresses them personally and is confirmed as Philip's successor. The Greek city-states to the south have been held in check by Philip's power. News of his death produces immediate uprisings. Thebes and Athens move to reassert their independence. They expect the young king to be occupied consolidating his position. They expect time. Alexander gives them none. He marches south with his army at a speed that leaves the Greeks unable to prepare a coordinated response. He appears before Thebes with forces the city cannot match. Thebes backs down, Athens backs down. The Greek states reconfirmed the arrangements Philip had established, acknowledging Macedonian leadership of the League of Greek States. Then news arrives from the north and west. Tribes in Thrace and Illyria, sensing opportunity in the change of king, are moving against Macedonian territory. Alexander turns away from Greece immediately and marches north. The campaigns that follow demonstrate everything that will define his generalship: speed that disorients his enemies, tactical improvisation in difficult terrain, personal courage at the front of his troops. He is reported to have reached the Danube in this campaign and crossed it unimprovised. Rafts to strike a tribe that believed the river made them safe. They were wrong. The message is consistent with what Alexander will say throughout his career in different ways. There is no barrier he will not cross to reach an enemy that has challenged him. Rest now. The young king is moving constantly. Macedon is secure for now. But Alexander is already looking further than Macedon. He always has been. Good night.
3335 BC, Alexander is dealing with threats on multiple fronts simultaneously. This is a pattern that will define his entire reign. He never faces one problem at a time, because his ambitions create new problems faster than old ones can be resolved. In the north, the Thracian and Illyrian campaigns have been successful. The tribes that moved against Macedonian territory have been defeated and pushed back. Alexander has demonstrated to the northern frontier peoples that the change of king in Macedon means nothing for their practical situation. The borders hold. Then false news reaches southern Greece. A rumor spreads that Alexander has been killed in the northern campaigns. Thebes seizes on it. The Thebans expel the Macedonian garrison from their citadel and declare their independence. Athens, encouraged by Persian money that has been flowing into the city to destabilize Macedonian influence, is moving toward open opposition as well. Alexander is not dead. He hears the news of the Theban revolt and moves south with extraordinary speed. He covers the distance from Illyria to central Greece in approximately 2 weeks, a march that stuns the Greeks, who believed they had weeks to prepare. He appears before Thebes, before the city has time to build meaningful defenses or secure outside support. He offers Thebes a final opportunity to surrender. The Thebans refuse. The assault that follows is swift and total. Thebes is taken. Its walls are demolished, and the city is effectively destroyed. The population is enslaved. Only temples and the house of the poet Pindar, whom Alexander reveres, are spared. The destruction of Thebes sends a message across Greece that no one misreads. Athens immediately abandons its opposition and sends a submissive embassy. The other Greek states that had been wavering fall back into line. Alexander has demonstrated in the starkest possible terms what resistance what Macedonian authority means. He is also demonstrating something about his own character. He can be extraordinarily generous to those who submit. He can be absolutely merciless to those who resist and are defeated. Both qualities are real. Both serve his purposes, the choice of which response an enemy receives is theirs to make. With Greece secured and the northern borders stable, Alexander can now focus on what he has been planning since his father's time, and what he himself has dreamed of. Since childhood, the campaign against Persia, the greatest empire in the known world, the enemy that twice invaded Greece and burned Athens, the target that would make any general famous, the conquest that would make Alexander immortal. He begins preparations. He will cross into Asia in the spring of 334 BC with an army of around 37,000 men. It is not a large army by the standards of what it will face, but it is exceptionally well trained, experienced, and led. Rest now. Macedon is secure tonight. Greece is quiet across the Hellespont. The Persian Empire waits, vast and ancient and entirely unaware of what is coming. Good night. Good night.
(334 BC spring). The Hellespont, the narrow strait of water that separates Europe from Asia. Alexander stands at the prow of his ship as it crosses. He is 22 years old. He throws his spear into the Asian shore as the ship approaches. It is a deliberate gesture. He is claiming Asia as his territory, won by the spear. He steps ashore and visits Troy. The ruins of the city his hero Achilles fought for are here, or what the Greeks of his time believe to be those ruins. He makes offerings at the tomb of Achilles. He runs a race around it naked. As was the custom for honoring heroes, he and Hephaestion lay wreaths together at the tombs of Achilles and Patroclus, the parallel to their own friendship unmistakable to everyone present. He then turns east to find the Persian forces that have assembled to meet him. The local Persian satraps, the regional governors, have gathered an army at the Granicus River. They have cavalry, infantry, and Greek mercenaries in their service. Their position on the far bank of the river is strong. Alexander's senior general Parmenion advises caution. The river crossing is dangerous. The Persian cavalry is waiting on the far bank. The time of day is late. Better to wait until morning and cross at dawn when the Persians have withdrawn from the bank. It is sensible advice. Alexander ignores it. He leads the cavalry charge across the river personally, riding directly at the strongest point of the Persian line. His helmet is struck twice by Persian axes. A Persian nobleman nearly kills him, his blade cutting through his helmet before the blow is stopped by Cleitus, one of Alexander's officers, who kills the Persian with his own spear. Alexander owes Cleitus his life at the Granicus. He will not repay the debt well in later years. The battle at the Granicus is a Macedonian victory. The Persian satraps are routed. The Greek mercenaries fighting for Persia are surrounded. Alexander orders them killed rather than captured, a decision that is harsh even by the standards of the time, and reflects both his fury at Greeks who fight against him and his desire to send a message about the consequences of opposing him. After the battle, he moves through Western Asia Minor, today's Turkey. Many Greek cities
open their gates willingly, welcoming liberation from Persian rule. He treats the populations generously, removes pro-Persian rulers, and in several cases reduces taxation. He's building a reputation as a liberator, rather than just another conqueror whether. This reputation is fully deserved, is more complicated, but it serves his purposes. Rest now, Asia Minor is opening before him. He has crossed the line that separates the world he knew from the world he is making. Good night. Good night.
Third 334 to 333 BC, Alexander moves through Asia. Minor systematically city by city, region by region. The western edge of the Persian Empire comes under his control. Some places resist most do not. The speed of his movement and the reputation built at the Granicus make resistance seem futile to many who might otherwise have fought. He reaches the city of Gordium, the ancient capital of Phrygia in the center of what is today Turkey, in the temple of Zeus here. There is an object that has accumulated centuries of legend around it, an ox cart, tied to a post with an extraordinarily complex knot of cornel bark. The knot has no visible ends, the prophecy attached to. It holds that whoever unties it will become the ruler of all Asia. Alexander examines the knot. He cannot find the ends. He cannot unravel it by conventional means. The sources differ on what he does. Next, one account says he draws his sword and cuts through it. Another says he removes the pin from the yoke to which the knot is attached and simply lifts the rope away. Either way, he declares the prophecy fulfilled. And that night there is thunder and lightning, which his seers interpret as divine confirmation. The episode tells us something about Alexander's approach to obstacles when confronted with a problem that cannot be solved by conventional methods. He does not accept the conventional frame. He changes the terms. Whether cutting the knot counts as untying it is a philosophical question he apparently considers irrelevant. The result is what matters. While at Gordium, he receives news that is potentially more dangerous than any military threat. He falls seriously ill. The illness is severe enough that his recovery is uncertain. His physician Philip of Acarnania prepares a medicine. At the same moment, a letter arrives from Parmenion warning Alexander that Philip has been bribed by the Persians to poison him. Alexander reads the letter. He hands it to Philip to read. At the same moment, he drinks the medicine. He watches Philip read the accusation against himself while drinking. What Philip has prepared, it is either an act of extraordinary trust or a calculated demonstration that he does not fear death from any source, including betrayal, possibly both. He recovers. He continues south through Anatolia toward the narrow coastal plain where the mountains come close to the sea. The Cilician Gates, a pass so narrow that a handful of men could hold it against an army. The Persian defenders abandon it before Alexander arrives. A failure of nerve that saves him a campaign that might have lasted months. Beyond the Cilician Gates lies Syria, and beyond that the heart of the Persian Empire. And somewhere in that direction, the Persian King Darius III is assembling the largest army Alexander has yet faced. Rest now. The pass is behind him. The road south is open. Darius is waiting. Good night. 333 BC November. The coastal plain near the town of Isis in what is today's southern Turkey, a narrow strip of land between the mountains and the sea. Alexander has been moving south, Darius has been moving north. To meet him through a combination of miscommunication and intelligence failures, the two armies pass each other. Darius ends up behind Alexander. Cutting his supply lines, Alexander turns around. What faces Alexander at Isis is a Persian army vastly larger than his own. Ancient sources give wildly varying numbers for the Persian force. Modern estimates suggest somewhere between 60 and 100,000 men against Alexander's 40,000. The Persians also hold a strong position on the far bank of the Pinarus River. Darius, commanding from the center, behind a screen of Greek mercenaries, has chosen his ground carefully. The battle begins with the Macedonian cavalry on the right wing, led by Alexander personally. He drives hard toward the center of the Persian line, aiming directly at Darius himself. The Persian left wing is broken by the Macedonian cavalry charge. Gaps open in the Persian line. In the center, and on the Macedonian left, things are harder. The Macedonian left flank is pushed back by Persian forces crossing the river. The phalanx in the center struggles against the Greek mercenaries fighting for Darius for a period. The outcome is genuinely uncertain. But Alexander's cavalry reaches the Persian center. Darius can see the Macedonian horse driving toward him. Around him, men are dying. The line is collapsing from the left. And then Darius does something that defines the battle and his own historical reputation. He turns his chariot and flees. When the king flees, the army follows. The Persian route becomes total. Alexander pursues until darkness stops him. Darius escapes with a small group of followers, but leaves behind his camp, his treasury, his mother, his wife, and his children. They are captured by Alexander's forces. Alexander visits the royal tent that evening. It is filled with gold vessels, incense, and every luxury of the Persian court. He bathes in Darius's bath, sits at his table, and eats his food. He is reported to say, "This is what it is to be a king. It is theatrical, but it is also genuine." He understands the symbolic power of occupying the space his enemy occupied. He treats Darius's captured family with complete respect. His mother, Sisigambis, initially prostrates herself before Hephaestion, mistaking him for Alexander. Alexander tells her she has not made a mistake, that Hephaestion is also an Alexander. The family is kept in comfort and treated as royalty throughout his campaigns. Rest now. The battlefield of Issus is quiet. Tonight, the Persian Empire has lost its first great battle. Everything that follows flows from this day. Good night. Good night. (333 BC). After Isis, Alexander does not pursue Darius eastward into the heart of Persia. He turns south instead, moving down the eastern Mediterranean coast. His reasoning is strategic and sound. The Persian fleet still controls the sea. As long as Persian ships can operate freely, they can land forces behind him, cut his supply lines, and threaten Greece and Macedon. He needs to neutralize the fleet, and the way to neutralize a fleet without having one of your own is to deny it its ports. City after city along the Phoenician coast submits. Byblos, Sidon, the great trading cities open their gates. Then Alexander reaches Tyre, and Tyre does not open its gates. Tyre is not an ordinary city. It is built on an island approximately half a kilometer from the mainland. Its walls rise directly
from the sea on all sides, in places to a height of 45 meters. It has withstood sieges before, including a 13-year siege by the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar that ended in negotiation. Rather than capture, the Tyrians are confident their island fortress has never been taken by storm. Alexander looks at the island. He looks at the shallow water between the island and the mainland. He makes a decision. He will build a causeway, a mole of earth and stone, extending from the mainland to the island, 1/2 kilometer across the sea. He will walk to Tyre. The construction begins. Tens of thousands of workers tear down the ruins of old Tyre on the mainland, throwing the stones and timber into the sea. The causeway grows slowly outward. In the early stages, it is relatively easy as it approaches the island. It enters deeper water and comes within range of Tyrian ships, and archers' workers are killed. Progress slows. The Tyrians are not passive. They send fire ships against the causeway and its wooden siege towers, burning them down. They send divers to cut the anchor ropes of Macedonian vessels. They attack the end of the causeway from ships on both sides simultaneously. For weeks, the progress is painfully slow. Alexander secures a fleet from the Phoenician cities that have already submitted, and from Cyprus he now has a naval superiority. He can blockade Tyre from the sea, while the causeway advances from the land. The Tyrians are now fighting on multiple fronts with no prospect of relief. After 7 months, the causeway reaches the walls. Siege engines are brought up. The walls are battered from the causeway, and from ships carrying battering rams alongside the walls, a breach is made. Alexander leads the assault personally, crossing into the city through the gap in the walls. The fall of Tyre is brutal. 8,000 Tyrians are killed in the final assault. 2,000 more are crucified along the beach. Around 30,000 are sold into slavery. The punishment is extreme, even by ancient standards, and reflects both the length of the siege and Alexander's fury at the resistance. The causeway Alexander built is still there. Over the centuries, sediment has accumulated around it, and the former island of Tyre is now a peninsula. The city Alexander changed the geography to reach, changed the geography permanently. Rest now. The siege is over. The coast is his. The fleet is neutralized. The road to Egypt is open. Good night. Good night.
(332 BC). After Tyre, Alexander continues south. Gaza resists and is taken after a 2-month siege. Then he enters Egypt. The Persian satrap who governs Egypt surrenders without a fight. The Egyptians have no particular loyalty to their Persian rulers and receive Alexander as a liberator. He is welcomed with something approaching enthusiasm. He goes to Memphis, the ancient capital, and performs sacrifices to the Egyptian gods, including the sacred Apis bull. This is a deliberate and important gesture. He is presenting himself not as a foreign conqueror, but as a legitimate ruler within the Egyptian religious tradition. The contrast with the Persian rulers who had sometimes shown contempt for Egyptian religious customs is not lost on the Egyptian priests. He is crowned pharaoh, son of Amun,
The living Horus, he accepts these titles and everything that comes with them. The capacity to move between identities, to be whatever the people he rules need him to be while remaining fundamentally himself, is one of Alexander's most unusual characteristics. He travels to the Oracle of Amun at the Siwa Oasis, a journey of several hundred kilometers through the desert. Why he makes this difficult journey is not entirely clear from the sources. What happens at Siwa is also unclear. The priests of Amun greet him as the son of the god Alexander receives. Whatever the oracle tells him privately, and shares the content with no one, he says, only that he received the answer his heart desired. The most lasting thing he does in Egypt is choose a site for a new city. He walks the coastline west of the Nile Delta and marks out the boundaries of a city himself using grain. The story goes, because there is no chalk available, the site is a strip of land between the sea and a lake, with a natural harbor and access to the Nile. He names it Alexandria. He does not stay to see it built. He leaves his architects and governors to proceed and moves on. But Alexandria becomes one of the most important cities in the ancient world. Under the Ptolemaic dynasty that follows Alexander, it grows into the greatest city of its age. Its library becomes the largest repository of knowledge in the ancient world. Its population reaches 500,000 for centuries. It is the center of Mediterranean intellectual and commercial life. Of the many Alexandrias he founds across his campaign, and there are around 20 of them, Alexandria in Egypt is the one that survives and flourishes. It still exists today as the city of Alexandria, the second largest city in Egypt, with a population of over 5 million people. A city that began as lines drawn in grain on a beach by a 24-year-old king from Macedon. Rest now. The Mediterranean glitters tonight off the coast of a city that does not yet exist, but will outlast its founder by thousands of years. Good night. Good night.
Through 31 BC, Alexander leaves Egypt and moves. Northeast Darius has spent the time since. ISIS rebuilding his army, he has assembled an enormous force on the plains of Gaugamela. In what is today northern Iraq, he has chosen the ground carefully this time, a wide flat plain with no natural features to restrict his numbers or limit the effectiveness of his cavalry and his secret weapon scythed. Chariots, war elephants from India, a force that ancient sources number in the hundreds of thousands, though modern estimates are more conservative. Darius also sends Alexander a diplomatic offer. He will cede all territory west of the Euphrates. He will pay an enormous ransom for his captured family. He will give his daughter in marriage Parmenion. Alexander's senior general tells him that if he were Alexander, he would accept these terms. Alexander replies that so would he. If he were Parmenion, he rejects the offer. He wants Persia entirely, not half of it. The night before the battle, Parmenion suggests a night attack. The Persian army is so large that attacking in darkness might reduce the effect of their numbers. Alexander
refuses again. He says he will not steal his victory. He sleeps so soundly that his commanders have to wake him in the morning. Whether this is genuine equanimity or a performance for his men is impossible to know. Perhaps both. The battle opens with the Persian cavalry attacking both Macedonian flanks simultaneously. The fighting is ferocious on both sides. The Macedonian left is pushed back severely. A gap opens in the Persian line as their cavalry commits to the pursuit. Alexander drives his companion cavalry through this gap in a wedge formation aimed directly at Darius. For the second time, Darius watches the Macedonian cavalry driving toward him through a collapsing line. For the second time, he turns and flees. The signal his flight sends ripples through the entire Persian army. Commanders look for the king and cannot find him. The units that know he has fled begin to disengage. The collapse that follows is catastrophic for Persia. Alexander wants to pursue Darius immediately, but receives an urgent message that the Macedonian left is being overrun. He turns back to rescue his own line before resuming the pursuit. Darius escapes again. This decision to save his own forces rather than pursue the king cost Alexander the chance to end the war that day. But it reflects something consistent in him. His men come before his personal glory, except when they do not. Gaugamela is the decisive battle of the Persian campaign. After this day, the Achaemenid Persian Empire effectively ceases to exist as a military power. The great cities of Persia lie open before Alexander: Babylon, Susa, Persepolis. Rest now. The plains of Gaugamela are quiet and dark tonight. The Persian Empire has ended. Something new is beginning. Good night. Good night. (331 to 330 BC). After Gaugamela, the great cities of the Persian Empire open before Alexander. One by one, Babylon surrenders. Without resistance, its population lines the roads to welcome him. He respects their customs, their temples, and their gods. He presents himself as a legitimate successor to the Babylonian kings, not as a conqueror. It is the same approach he used in Egypt, and it works for the same reasons. Susa falls next. The treasury there is staggering 50,000 talents of silver. More wealth than Macedon would accumulate in generations. Alexander sends it back west to fund his campaigns and his administration. He is beginning to understand the scale of what he has taken. The Persian Empire was not just a military opponent. It was one of the most sophisticated administrative and financial systems the ancient world had produced. Then he moves toward Persepolis, the ceremonial capital of the Achaemenid dynasty. The city the Persians built to represent the glory and power of their empire. Its palaces and audience halls are among the most magnificent structures in the ancient world. The treasury at Persepolis is even larger than Susa. Ancient sources record that it takes 3,000 camels and numerous mules to carry the treasure away. Alexander enters Persepolis and allows his troops to sack the city. This is deliberate. It is a reward for his soldiers and a statement about the fate of Persian resistance. The civilian population suffers. The extent of the violence is recorded in the sources without apology or mitigation. Then comes the most debated event of the Persian campaign: the burning of the great palace of Xerxes, the palace complex that is the symbolic heart of the Achaemenid dynasty. It burns to the ground. The ancient sources offer two explanations. One says it was a drunken act committed at a servitory banquet at the suggestion of an Athenian courtesan named Thais, who argued it was justice for the Persian burning of Athens over a century before. The other says it was a calculated political act, a deliberate signal that the Achaemenid dynasty was finished, that Alexander was not its successor, but its destroyer. Ancient sources, including Arrian, who is generally sympathetic to Alexander, suggest he regretted the burning afterward. If the regret is genuine, it suggests the drunken act account has some truth to it. If it was calculated, he had nothing to regret. The ambiguity is never resolved. The ruins of Persepolis still stand today in southern Iran. The great columns and carved stone reliefs that survived the fire are among the most impressive archaeological remains in the world. Visitors stand among them and try to imagine what it looked like before. That night in 330 BC. Rest now. The fire at Persepolis is out. The dynasty it represented as Alexander is master of the Persian world. But he is not finished. Good night. Good night.
330 BC, Darius is still alive. He is fleeing eastward with a diminishing band of followers. Alexander pursues with a flying column, covering enormous distances at speed. He is gaining Darius's own commanders, seeing that their king cannot escape, and that continuing to follow him offers no future. Make a decision. They kill Darius themselves. Alexander finds the body of Darius abandoned by a road in the desert, the king who commanded the largest empire in the world. 6 months ago is dead in a ditch, killed by his own men. Alexander covers the body. With his own cloak, he sends it to Persepolis for burial with the honors appropriate to a Persian king. The gesture is both genuine and political. He wants to be seen as Darius's legitimate successor, not just his conqueror. The man who killed Darius, a Bactrian noble named Bessus, has declared himself the new Persian king. He has fled north into the province of Bactria, today's Afghanistan. Alexander cannot leave a rival claimant to the Persian throne alive and undefeated. He follows. What follows is 3 years of the hardest campaigning of Alexander's career. The mountains and deserts of Central Asia are nothing like the plains of Persia or the coasts of the Mediterranean. The terrain is brutal, the climate extreme, the enemy elusive. This is not a campaign of decisive, pitched battles. It is a war of ambushes, fortified positions on impassable crags, guerrilla resistance, and populations that submit and then revolt as soon as the main army moves on. Bessus is eventually captured through treachery by his own supporters and handed to Alexander. He is mutilated and executed in the Persian manner, his nose and ears cut off before he is killed. The punishment is designed to speak to the Persian nobles whose support Alexander needs. It is a signal that he will apply Persian justice as well as Macedonian. But the resistance in Bactria and Sogdiana does not end with Bessus, a local nobleman named Spitomenes leads a highly effective
guerrilla campaign for 2 years, he destroys a Macedonian force of 2,000 in an ambush. He appears and disappears across the steppe, always moving, never accepting. A pitched battle, Alexander cannot pin him down. In Bactria, Alexander makes a personal decision that surprises everyone around him. He marries Roxana, the daughter of a Bactrian nobleman. It is a genuine attachment, not merely a political arrangement. She will travel with him for the rest of his campaigns and bear him a son. For his Macedonian commanders and soldiers, the marriage to a woman they consider a barbarian is unsettling. It is the first clear signal that Alexander's vision of his empire is not the Greek world ruling over everyone else, but something more genuinely mixed. Rest now. The mountains of Central Asia rise in every direction tonight. The army is camped in a valley. It will leave in the morning. Alexander is looking east. He is always looking east. Good night. Good night.
Through 27 BC, Alexander has been in Asia for 7 years. He has conquered more territory than any commander in history. He controls everything from Greece to the borders of India. His soldiers have marched over 25,000 kilometers. They are experienced, battle-hardened and exhausted in ways that do not fully show yet, but are accumulating beneath the surface. Alexander looks east beyond the Hindu Kush. Mountains lies India in the Greek world. India is the edge of the earth, a land of wonders and extremes, a place where the known world ends. For a man who has spent his life pushing against every limit, this is not a reason to stop. It is a reason to continue. He crosses the Hindu Kush for the second time in his campaign, moving through passes at altitude where the air is thin and the cold is brutal. Men and animals die on the crossing. Those who survive emerge into the valleys of what is today Pakistan, looking down at a landscape none of them have seen before. The kingdoms of northwest India respond to his approach in different ways. Some send embassies and submit, others prepare to resist. The city of Aornos, perched on a rock above the Indus River at a height that ancient sources describe as the place Heracles himself failed to take, draws Alexander immediately. If Heracles failed here, Alexander must succeed. The assault on Aornos is a feat of military engineering. The rock is accessible only from one direction. Alexander's engineers construct a ramp and causeway across a ravine to bring his siege engines within range. The defenders, watching the impossible structure being built across the chasm, lose their nerve and attempt to negotiate. Alexander offers terms and then attacks anyway when he sees an opportunity to take the position. Without further negotiation, the rock falls. He crosses the Indus River on a bridge of boats and enters the kingdom of Taxila, whose king has submitted and is now an ally. He provides Alexander with intelligence, guides, and additional troops. He also tells Alexander about the king to the east, Porus, who rules the territory beyond the Hydaspes River, and who will not submit. There are signs by now that something is changing in Alexander's court and in his own character. The years of absolute power
The distance from home and from the cultural checks that Macedonian noble society placed on behavior. The alcohol that flows at every feast, and the pressure of campaigning without end are taking their toll on the man and on the relationships around him. 2 episodes stand out. He kills Cletus, the man who saved his life at the Granicus. In a drunken argument at a banquet, Cletus has criticized Alexander for adopting Persian customs and denigrating the achievements of Philip, and the Macedonians. Alexander throws a spear at him. In fury, Cletus dies. Alexander's remorse is genuine and deep. He refuses to eat or drink for 3 days. Rest now. The Indus flows dark and wide. Tonight, beyond it, one last great battle is waiting. Good night. Good night.
Through 26 BC, the Hydaspes River in what is today Pakistan, Alexander faces his most formidable opponent since Darius, King Porus of the Pauravas, a man reportedly of enormous physical stature, standing nearly 2 meters tall, commanding an army that includes something Alexander has never faced in a pitched battle before: war elephants, 200 of them, standing in a line across the front of the Indian army, like a living wall. The river is in flood. The monsoon has swollen it beyond easy crossing. Porus has positioned his army on the far bank, watching every ford for weeks. Alexander makes feints, sending cavalry to different points along the bank at night, making noise, suggesting crossings that never come. Porus responds each time, moving his army to block the threatened crossing. Gradually, Porus stops responding to every movement. The feints have become routine. Alexander identifies a crossing point, 17 kilometers upstream from the main camp, hidden behind a forested island in the river. On a night of violent storm, using the thunder to mask the sound of movement, he crosses with his best cavalry and infantry, while leaving the force in the main camp with orders to make noise and maintain the impression that the army is still there. Porus learns of the crossing, but not its scale. He sends his son with the cavalry, forced to deal with what he assumes is a raiding party. Alexander destroys this force completely. Porus now understands. He faces the full Macedonian army across the river and must give battle. The challenge of the elephants is real. Macedonian horses will not charge toward elephants. The smell and size of the animals terrifies them. Alexander adapts his formation. He concentrates his cavalry on the flanks and uses his infantry phalanx and archers against the elephants and Indian infantry in the center. The battle is the hardest Alexander fights in Asia. The elephants cause serious casualties, picking up men with their trunks, trampling others, disrupting the infantry formations. But the Macedonian cavalry on the flanks envelops the Indian army, and the archers wound the elephants until they become uncontrollable, turning on their own side, in pain and confusion. Porus fights until the end. Wounded multiple times, he remains on his elephant, directing his men. When the battle is clearly lost, he is brought before Alexander. Alexander asks how he wishes to be treated. Porus answers as befits a king. Alexander restores his kingdom to him and adds additional territory. He makes him an ally and a friend. It is one of the most famous acts of generosity in his campaigns. He names 2 cities after this battle:
One, he names Nicaea for victory. The other, he names Bucephala for his horse Bucephalus, who dies after the battle from wounds and age. He's carried Alexander through every campaign. Since childhood, Alexander mourns him as he would a companion. Rest now. The Hydaspes flows quietly tonight. The greatest battle in India is over, but the army is about to reach its limit. Good night.
Through 26 BC, after the Hydaspes, Alexander pushes. Further east, he wants to reach the Ganges, the great river his geographers have told him lies beyond. He wants to reach the Eastern Ocean, the edge of the world where the land ends and the water begins. He believes he is close. He is not. His army stops at the Hydaspes River. They go no further, not because of an enemy army, not because of a geographical barrier, because the men refuse to move. They have been marching for 8 years. They have crossed the Hellespont, conquered Persia, pushed through the mountains of Afghanistan and crossed the Hindu Kush twice. They are deep in a country none of them knew existed when they left Macedon. They have heard from captured soldiers and local people that beyond the next river, there are more rivers, more armies, more elephants, a subcontinent that stretches further than their maps show. And they have families in Macedon who have not seen them for nearly a decade. Alexander addresses his men. He appeals to their ambition and their loyalty and their shared history. He speaks of the glory that lies within reach for the first time. The speech does not work. The men listen in silence. When he asks for a response, there is none. He goes to his tent and refuses to come out for 3 days, hoping that the army will relent. It does not. He accepts the decision. He sacrifices to the gods and announces that the omens are unfavorable for continuing east. He orders the army to turn around. He marks the spot with 12 giant altars, one for each of the Olympian gods, a monument to the furthest point his army reached. No trace of them has been found. The return is not a simple reversal of the outward march. Alexander takes his army south down the Indus River toward the sea, fighting through territories that have not been subdued. On the way east, he is wounded seriously in an assault on a city of the Mali people, an arrow penetrating his lung. For a period, those outside the walls believe he is dead. When he is carried out alive, the reaction of his soldiers, the combination of relief and fury at the risk he has taken, speaks to the relationship between this commander and his men. From the mouth of the Indus, he divides his forces. His admiral Narcissus takes the fleet along the coast toward Persia. Alexander leads the main army through the Gadrosian Desert, today's Balochistan in Pakistan. It is a catastrophic decision. The desert is one of the most inhospitable on earth. Heat, no water, no food. Men and women in camp, followers die in enormous numbers. Ancient sources suggest losses as high as 3/4 of the force that enters. The desert modern estimates are lower, but agree the losses are severe. Why Alexander chooses this route is debated. He may have wanted to supply Narcissus' fleet from the coast. He may have wanted to match a feat of the legendary queen Semiramis. He may have miscalculated the difficulty. Whatever the reason, the Gadrosian march is one of the worst disasters of his campaigns.
Rest now. The desert is finally behind them. The survivors are moving toward Persia. They are going home. What that means after 8 years away is something none of them can yet fully imagine. Good night. Good night.
Through 4 BC, Alexander returns to Persia. He is 31 years old. He has been away from Macedon for 9 years. The empire he has built stretches from Greece to the borders of India, from Egypt to the shores of the Caspian Sea. No one in history has ever controlled this much territory. But the return is not triumphant in the way his earlier victories, where he finds problems everywhere. Governors he appointed have abused their positions, assuming he would never return from India. Treasuries have been embezzled, local populations have been mistreated. He responds with swift and sometimes severe punishment, executing several officials, including men who had served him loyally for years but overstepped in his absence. At Susa, he organizes a mass wedding. He himself marries Tyre, the daughter of Darius, adding a Persian royal bride to his Bactrian wife Roxana. Around 80 of his senior Macedonian officers are married to Persian noblewomen in the same ceremony. 10,000 of his Macedonian soldiers who have taken Asian wives or companions are given wedding gifts. It is a deliberate program of cultural fusion, of binding the Macedonian and Persian worlds together through personal bonds. His Macedonian veterans are not happy. The integration of Persian nobles into the army, the adoption of Persian court customs, the mass wedding, all of these feel to many of his men like a rejection of their own identity and their own primacy in the empire. They built at Opis on the Tigris the army. Mutinies. The men demand to be sent home. Alexander confronts them directly, lists everything he and his father have done for them, and then dismisses them all from service. The Macedonians break. They beg to be reinstated. The reconciliation that follows is genuine on both sides. In 324 BC, Hephaestion dies in Ecbatana. Probably from typhoid. Alexander's grief is of a scale that shocks even those who knew how close the two men were. He lies with the body for an entire day. He orders mourning across the empire. He asks the oracle of Amun whether Hephaestion may be worshipped as a god. The answer allows worship as a hero. He plans an enormous funeral monument. In spring 323 BC, Alexander is in Babylon, planning his next campaigns. Arabia, then perhaps west toward Carthage. In the Mediterranean, he is making preparations, organizing supplies, meeting ambassadors from across the known world who come to acknowledge his power. In early June, he attends a banquet and drinks heavily. Over the following days, he develops a fever. It worsens steadily. His commanders gather. The army gathers outside. They are allowed to file past him. One by one, he is too weak to speak, but raises his hand in recognition as each man passes. On the 10th or 11th of June 323 BC, Alexander dies in the palace of Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon. He is 32 years old. He has reigned for 13 years. When his commanders ask who should inherit his empire, he is reported to have said the strongest, or perhaps he said nothing. Perhaps he was already beyond speech. The sources disagree on this, as they disagree on so much. Rest now. Babylon is quiet tonight.
the greatest conqueror of the ancient world, is gone. The world he made is already beginning to come apart. Good night. Good night.
Alexander is dead. He leaves no clear. Successor Roxana is pregnant, but the child is not yet born and may be a girl. His half-brother Philip Aristeas is alive, but has a mental disability that makes effective rulership impossible. The word he spoke at the end, if he spoke it, the strongest, is either a description of what will happen or a prediction of the chaos that follows. In either case, it is accurate. His generals, the men who fought beside him for a decade, who are called the Diadochi, the successors, begin almost immediately to position themselves. At first, they maintain the pretense of governing. Collectively, in the name of Alexander's heirs, Roxana gives birth to a boy. Alexander IV Philip Aristeas is proclaimed co-king. The empire is nominally unified. It does not stay that way. Within 2 years, open warfare breaks out among the successors. Perdiccas, who holds the ring Alexander gave him at his death and considers himself the legitimate regent, is assassinated by his own officers in Egypt. Antipater controls Macedon in Greece. Antigonus controls much of Asia Minor. And Persia Ptolemy has seized Egypt and stolen Alexander's body, diverting the funeral cortege from Macedon to Alexandria. Possessing Alexander's body is a political statement about legitimacy. The wars of the Diadochi last for over 40 years. They are extraordinarily complex, involving shifting alliances, betrayals, assassinations, and battles across the entire span of Alexander's former empire. Both of Alexander's sons, Alexander IV and his illegitimate son Heracles, are killed before reaching adulthood, removing any possibility of a legitimate Argead succession. Olympias, Alexander's mother, is executed by Cassander. The family that built the empire is gone within a generation of its founder's death. What emerges from the chaos is a series of kingdoms ruled by Alexander's former generals and their descendants. The Ptolemaic kingdom in Egypt lasts nearly 3 centuries, until Cleopatra VII, the last of the dynasty, dies in 30 BC. The Seleucid Empire in Asia is the largest of the successor states at its height, controlling Persia, Mesopotamia, and parts of Central Asia. The Antigonid dynasty rules Macedon and maintains influence over Greece. Smaller kingdoms emerge in Bactria, Pontus, Pergamon, and elsewhere. These successor kingdoms are the vehicle to which Alexander's most lasting cultural legacy spreads. A Greek language becomes the common tongue of educated people across the entire region, from the Mediterranean to Central Asia. Greek art, architecture, philosophy, and science mix with local traditions to produce the cultural synthesis known as Hellenism. Alexandria in Egypt, under the Ptolemies, becomes the greatest center of learning in the ancient world. The library and museum that preserve and develop the intellectual inheritance of Greece and incorporate the knowledge of Egypt, Persia, and beyond. Rest now. The empire has fragmented, but the world it created is still taking shape. Something has been set in motion that will run for centuries. Good night. Good night.
Alexander the Great died in 3233 BC. He was 32 years old. He had been king for 13 years. In that time, he had marched his army over 30,000 kilometers, fought dozens of battles without a single defeat, and built an empire stretching from Greece to the borders of India. No one in history has matched the scale of what he achieved in the time he had. The military legacy is straightforward. He is studied in military academies today. As he was in the ancient world, Julius Caesar wept at his statue. Napoleon measured himself against him. The combination of strategic vision, tactical flexibility, personal courage, and the ability to inspire extraordinary loyalty in his soldiers places him in a category almost by himself. The battles of the Granicus, Issus, Gaugamela, and the Hydaspes are still analyzed as examples of generalship at its highest level. The cultural legacy is more complex and more profound. The world Alexander created, the Hellenistic world of his successors, was the environment in which the major intellectual and religious developments of the following centuries took place. The New Testament is written in Greek because Greek is the common language of the Eastern Mediterranean that Alexander's conquests created. Early Christianity spreads along the routes and through the cities of the Hellenistic world. The philosophical schools of Athens, the science of Alexandria, the religious syncretism of a world where Greek gods and Egyptian gods and Persian gods exist side by side and gradually influence each other. All of this flows from what Alexander set in motion. The city of Alexandria in Egypt becomes one of the most important places in human intellectual history. Its library at its height holds hundreds of thousands of scrolls. Euclid develops his geometry there. Eratosthenes calculates the circumference of the earth there with remarkable accuracy. Archimedes studies there. The Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, is produced there. It is the greatest concentration of human knowledge the ancient world produces. The question of Alexander's character is one that each generation answers differently. He is not a simple figure. He burns Persepolis in what may have been a drunken moment and regrets it. He kills his friend Cleitus in a rage and mourns him deeply. He shows extraordinary generosity to defeated enemies and brutal severity to those who resist too long. He pushes his men beyond what any reasonable commander would ask, and they follow him. He adopts the customs of the peoples he conquers in ways that anger his own men and may reflect a genuine vision of a unified world. Was he trying to create something genuinely new, a world where Macedonian and Persian, and Egyptian and Indian could find a common identity under a ruler who belonged to all of them? Or was he simply a conqueror whose actions look like a program in retrospect? Historians have argued this for 2,300 years and will continue to argue it. What is not arguable is the scale of his impact. The world of 300 BC looks fundamentally different from the world of 350 BC because of what one man did in 13 years. The languages people spoke, the cities they lived in, the gods they worshipped, the ideas they debated, all of these were changed by Alexander's campaigns in ways that persisted for centuries. He was born in Pella in 356 BC, the son of a Macedonian king and an emperor princess who filled his head with stories of divine descent. He died in Babylon in 323 BC, 32 years old, in a palace built by Nebuchadnezzar, having conquered the world he knew and stood at the edge of a world he could not reach. His body was taken to Alexandria and placed in a golden sarcophagus. Visitors came for centuries to see it. Julius Caesar came. Augustus came and accidentally broke the nose. At some point, the tomb was lost. It has never been found. Alexander the Great, 356 BC to 323 BC. He was here. He changed everything. The world he left behind is still, in ways, both visible and invisible, part of the world we inhabit. Sleep now. The story is complete. Good night. Good night.